Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege, here on Friday. We've made it to the end of the week. We're just a couple of days away from both conference championships here for the NFL season. The NFL season's coming to a quick end here. We're only a few weeks away from the big game, and on today's show, we're obviously going to preview the two conference games. I've been saving it for the last day of the weekday to go over and just give any last minute updates on that. And the rest of the show is going to be surrounded by some head coaching news with the Dallas Cowboys and what they're looking to do for their head coaching position. Liam Cohen being hired as the Jacksonville Jaguars' new head coach, and the biggest news of all, announced today that Pete Carroll is returning to the NFL to coach the Las Vegas Raiders. More details on all of that coming up on today's show. But before we get started, as always, if you guys have any questions or comments or any opinions you'd like to share during these live shows, please don't hesitate to do so, because your input and insight is always very much appreciated, and we always like it when you guys give a different perspective on anything that we might be talking about. So if you want to make it absolutely sure that any message you have stands out and gets featured on the show, there's an easy way to do that. Just go ahead and use the super. I'll get your guys' thoughts on anything I say or anything that we're talking about on today's show. So go ahead, let us know what you're thinking. Hit the super chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as exciting as possible. Again, let us know what's on your mind during these live shows. Hit the super chat button and get involved. Now, we could start with some head coaching news. Some breaking news that happened this morning while I was getting ready for this show was the hiring of Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll is returning to the NFL. News broke this morning from various sources saying that the Raiders had hired former Seahawks head coach Pete Carroll, and now he'll be returning to a different team, his fourth team now in his career in the NFL. He'll be at the helm of the Raiders for the next 3 years on his 3-year deal, with an option for a fourth year as well if both parties feel like that's something that they want to do. But Pete Carroll, I mentioned, former Seattle Seahawks head coach, but he actually took a year off from coaching. Things got a little bit, I guess, cold in Seattle, to put it lightly. And they decided to part ways, and Pete Carroll actually returned to USC as a teacher slash, just, I guess teacher would be the best way to describe it. I'm not sure if he was actually teaching a class, but that's what he went back to do at USC, while also remaining as sort of an advisor for the Seattle Seahawks. And he spent a year away from it, and now his name was being mentioned in a lot of reports and a lot of links to the various spots we had for head coaching opportunities. And after some of the big hitters found a new home, like Mike Vrabel, Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, Pete Carroll was right next up, and he lands in Las Vegas, of all places. So he'll be joining owner Mark Davis, minority owner Tom Brady over there. A lot of attraction already just from Tom Brady and Pete Carroll. So that's something I like about it. And, Pete Carroll overall is most notably recognized for his time in Seattle, right, where he had a bunch of success in 10 postseason appearances in 14 seasons there. And he won the Super Bowl in 2013. He almost did in 2014, if not for that egregious passing call that he made that got intercepted at the goal line. And he finished with he actually had a 137, 89, and 1 record in 2010 to 2013 for the Seahawks. You could argue their most dominant and really prosperous years during that time there. So while we talked about a little bit before, a few weeks ago, how the links with Las Vegas were mostly with Ben Johnson, and it felt like, according to the reports, that Tom Brady really wanted Ben Johnson to be the coach of the Raiders, obviously, right? And he was very involved with that. And with that being the case, it ultimately was for naught because Ben Johnson just stayed in the division and Tom Brady now had to look elsewhere. But with Aaron Glenn being heavily linked to the Jets, Mike Vrabel already finding a home, that's somebody that Tom has a good relationship with. They decided to go with Pete Carroll, and you have all the experience there overall with Carroll, and obviously the age is something that comes up. He's 73 as of right now, coaching, now going into this new coaching venture, and a lot of people will point to that, and then you look at the next 3 years, which he's under contract with the Raiders, and you think that's something that is pretty unique, pretty unusual. I think that puts off a lot of people just because, of the age, right? They might think it's too old, and he will actually be the oldest head coach in NFL history once the season starts, once he turns 74 on September 15th. And, that is something that comes to mind. That is something that you can bring up, but I'm not really too worried about it. And I think, Pete Carroll overall was a solid option for them because of the experience and the winning pedigree. He's one of 3 head coaches to win the national championship and a Super Bowl as well. So I think with the Raiders and bringing in like these young new guys, like most recently, they gave it to Antonio Pierce. Before that, it was Josh McDaniels. Instead of giving it to somebody maybe with no head coaching experience like a Ben Johnson or an Aaron Glenn, maybe you could have given it to Vrabel, but that really wasn't an option with how quickly the Patriots moved. I think Pete Carroll brings that sort of stability and winning pedigree to this Raiders team, and it's a daunting task, obviously, because you have no quarterback, and the roster just really needs a lot of fixing. So that was something that maybe not working in your favor, but for Pete Carroll to accept this job and to have the resume that he does and have, again, the expertise to come in and really have the wherewithal to have seen a lot of scenarios, a lot of guys, a lot of different players that if in any scenario it might seem a little dicey, you have the confidence in Pete Carroll to have, something in his resume, something in his back pocket to attack any sort of situation because he's seen a lot in his coaching career. So I really like that about this hire overall. I will say I was surprised by it just because, I thought the Raiders maybe were going to go with somebody else. Like Bill Belichick was still a reasonable thing in my head, or like Robert Saleh if they were thinking of interviewing him as well. Dion, that was sort of like a pipe dream a few months ago, but now with everything settled down, it doesn't seem like we're going to have any major, announcements like that. But yeah, I wasn't expecting it. If anything, I wasn't really expecting it to happen today either, just because I thought one piece of head coaching news was already enough. We got this morning, and considering everything and how quickly it panned out, they already have their new general manager in John Spytek as well. So, they got the pieces in there, and now it's just all about getting to work and also, ironing out some of the other stuff like offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator and things like that. But, they got a lot of things to work with, Spytek and Pete Carroll. Obviously, they have a lot of cap space, which is obviously huge. They have $85.8 million to spend this year, which is the second most effective cap space this offseason. They got the 6th pick in the NFL draft this year as well, so that could mean quarterback depending on how the board falls or depending on what their next moves are, right? You got to have a quarterback this season. I think that's definitely the biggest hurdle that they got to get over, so how they use that pick is going to be huge for them. And they got an extra 3rd-round pick as well for trading Devontae Adams, and luckily for them, they have already one of the best tight ends in the NFL in Brock Bowers. So there are some portions of this that you are really excited about. Max Crosby's another one. Christian Wilkins, who dealt with a good amount of injuries this year as well, so he's going to be back again. And you got some pieces that are exciting, but you're definitely going to need to work a lot on both offense and defense with this group. But who better than Pete Carroll and all of his experience to kind of take up that challenge? And, the last thing I will say is, going back to the quarterback, because now that we have someone to kind of drive the ship a little bit, if you will. You need to figure out that quarterback position, and I don't think Tom Brady, as a minority owner and how involved he already seems to be, I don't think he'll allow them to go into another season with so many question marks there. So I am banking on the fact that they're going to figure out this quarterback position, whether it be someone like Sam Darnold, like Kirk Cousins potentially, if they think that fits, and Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, maybe another one. Both of them free agents from the Steelers, but Russell Wilson's an interesting one because of his history with Pete Carroll and some reported interest. Russell Wilson, I believe, talked pretty glowingly about Pete Carroll a few days ago, so initially it got everybody's wheels turning on that. And, it's nothing that's anywhere near concrete or anything like that, but it makes sense. Russ, Pete Carroll, free agent. If things don't work out with the Steelers, that could be a logical spot for him to go, at least for a veteran presence, and then they could also still draft a quarterback if they seem fit for that. But, there's still a lot of questions to go over, but the certainty right now is that the Raiders have a new guy in charge, and that will be Pete Carroll for the foreseeable future in Las Vegas. But that is one of the pieces of new coaching announcements that we got recently. The other one came in Jacksonville, really the state of Florida, with the Buccaneers' former offensive coordinator Liam Cohen now becoming the Jaguars' new head coach. And there's so much to talk about with this segment, how we got there from Tampa Bay to Jacksonville, and just all the commotion that went into this decision. We're going to talk about it when we return after this break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
We're back here on the Chip Shot Football Podcast here on a Friday, a day away from the weekend and 2 days away from the conference championships. And before we get into all of that, talking about the keys, the matchups, and the predictions, ultimately, we got to talk some more about Liam Cohen, a very famous name now, I think, for personally, like, a funny reason, because this entire situation is, like, just so unbelievable to me that I think it's pretty funny. But there was a lot of just like confusion, contradicting reports on this story that ultimately ends with Liam Cohen making the final decision in leaving his position at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as their offensive coordinator and finally accepting the head coaching role with the Jacksonville Jaguars. An insane chain of events that occurred yesterday and really from Wednesday afternoon all the way to today with Tampa Bay and Jacksonville. And really, to start things off, I guess, to kind of recap everything, the very first thing we heard that connected these two was the initial interest in Liam Cohen and the job that he did this past season with the Buccaneers. And that got a lot of people's attentions. In his first year there, he did a very good job with the Buccaneers, with Baker, with some of their young guys like Bucky Irving and Jalen McMillan. So it got a lot of people's attention, one of them being the Jaguars for their head coaching spot. And although we got word that he was taking his name out of consideration and decided to stay in Tampa Bay, it seemed like a couple days ago. And with that decision, the Buccaneers also had a new contract extension coming for him, right? That would have made him one of the highest paid coordinators in the NFL. So at this point, Liam Cohen had interviewed with the Jaguars. Then in this downtime, he said, you know what? I'm good, Jacksonville. I think I'm just going to stay with Tampa Bay. And, thanks for the opportunity and things like that, right? That's where I thought this was going. I thought Tampa Bay was able to keep their offensive coordinator, which was going to be great for them. But as soon as that happened, maybe not even a different day, but maybe just later in that day, the Jaguars fired their general manager, Trent Baalke, because we discussed yesterday with that news coming in that it could have been pushing candidates away, right? Because my initial point that I made yesterday on Trent Baalke and that decision by the Jaguars was that, that should have been something they did with Doug Peterson. They should have gotten rid of both of them and not just kept Trent Baalke, especially not Trent Baalke, because a lot of people, executives and people around the NFL, from what I've read, felt like there was a major shock when the Jaguars and their owner, Shad Khan, decided to stick with Trent Baalke. Of both candidates to stick with Trent Baalke, that took a lot of people by surprise because of the success there, or the lack of success in Jacksonville. It took a lot of people off guard, and especially me. I thought both of them were just going to go, and, it got really awkward, too, when you decide to keep Trent Baalke, and during a Zoom meeting with a bunch of media, they asked Shad Khan, the Jaguars owner, if a new head coach wanted a new general manager, would you be willing to move on? And quickly he said yes, whatever the head coach wants. If they want a new general manager, I have no problem with getting a new one, with Trent Baalke in the meeting with him at the same time. He said that right in front of his face. So already that looks like a mess. It looks very weird, and they have a awkward relationship, you would say. And, that already had some warning signs up for me for things in Jacksonville, right? It wasn't anything that I thought anybody would rightly want to be a part of. So it didn't surprise me when Liam Cohen said, you know what, I'm good. But then, the Jaguars fire their general manager and they reconnect with Liam Cohen just the next day. And then when we thought Jacksonville would pivot to somebody else like Robert Saleh or like Kellen Moore or something like that, we start hearing that yesterday Cohen changed his mind, started talking again with the Jaguars right after they fired Trent Baalke, and now he's going to be willing to take their head coaching job. And that was according to ESPN and CBS when that news broke yesterday. And apparently before he signed the extension with Tampa Bay, Cohen was contacted by the Jaguars, like I said, with a better offer, and he went to Jacksonville yesterday to close out that deal. And that's where things got a little bit conflicting with the Buccaneers and the Jaguars, I guess you could say, because he went to Jacksonville after, the news of them firing Trent Baalke and reconnecting with Liam Cohen about the position and reoffering it to him. He went to Jacksonville despite what some sources are saying, failed efforts from the Buccaneers to contact him yesterday to try and get in some sort of contact with him, get him to, figure out a date for when he could come in and sign that extension. But there was no answer for any contact reach to Liam Cohen, and that felt very off. It felt like a little bit shady, if I'm going to be honest. And despite those rumors, though, despite those reports coming from Tampa Bay, there was other reports coming from ESPN that said Liam Cohen actually let Todd Bowles know that he was, going to Jacksonville to try and interview and see if he could get this job. So we got two differing parties giving two different sides of their story. And regardless of what the truth is, obviously, right, it feels irrelevant now. But the final decision is obviously that Liam Cohen is now officially leaving the Buccaneers after one season there, and he is going to be the new head coach of the Jaguars. So he doesn't have to go too far, I think. I don't know how far Tampa Bay is from Jacksonville, but he's going to stay in the same state and be the new head coach. He's going to take over the responsibilities of developing Trevor Lawrence, which I think is the biggest thing, and working with some of their exciting talent like Trayvon Walker, I'm forgetting his name, Brian Thomas Jr., and Evan Ingram, and guys like this. They got some solid pieces there that I'm sure the partnership with Liam Cohen, now working with Brian Thomas Jr., and especially Trevor, allured the Jaguars to try and get Cohen over to be their new head coach. And I love that pairing. I think as a biased party, I guess, in this situation, just giving my thoughts on it, I think it's a great partnership. I think it's a great relationship now for Cohen to take over this young and high ceiling offense, I would say, because Trevor Lawrence, again, was drafted number 1 overall, and I think in my time, really following college football, he's one of the most talked about quarterback prospects that I can remember, at least in the last, few years here since, 2021 and things like that. So for him to still cast a good amount of doubt from people, and a lot of people not really being sure on whether or not he could ever actually show his true potential, that's not anywhere near where Trevor Lawrence should be. I think he definitely has a ceiling to be a lot better than what he's shown. But to his defense, you can't do much when now the organization that drafted you is on their 4th head coach. And you want to talk about messing development up, just bring in as many head coaches as the Jaguars have, and you see what you get ultimately with Trevor Lawrence. And not only that, the doubts around his play, but they decide to extend him to a ton of money, which is great for him. Obviously, you're not knocking that, but that's a lot more pressure on the organization to validate that and for them to turn this around as quickly as possible. So it's great for them. It's a great turn of events for them to ultimately end up with their main candidate, right, in Liam Cohen. That's who they wanted, and that's who they ended up getting. But it looks kind of weird. I don't know. If I was the Buccaneers, if I was a Bucs fan, I would be very mad. And it's understandable, right? Because it felt like you did everything from your part as the Buccaneers to kind of give, they gave him the opportunity to go out there and find that new journey, that new opportunity for him to be in an elevated position. And then for him to turn around and say, you know what, I'm going to stay. I think I'm going to keep my role here as the offensive coordinator. So the Bucs think that, all right, we're past that now. We're going to even give him an extension to have him, want to stay here as well, right? Not to get him to change his mind. But that didn't ultimately work, and Liam Cohen, then turns around again after Trent Baalke's fired and says, you know what, I am very much considering it, and I'm actually going to accept it. So for the Bucs, you kind of feel like duped and just like, I don't know, it feels like you're just led on, I would say. That's what I would best describe this as. You feel like you've been led down just like a meaningless, path where you end up losing your offensive coordinator anyway. And at the end of the day, I mean, Liam Cohen is getting a great opportunity for himself and his individual endeavors, right? Getting this new opportunity, which is great for him, and everybody does have the right, obviously, to back out at the last moment, as long as he hasn't signed that extension. I do understand that he can have second thoughts up until that moment that he is there to sign the extension if he decides to do so. But again, I'm trying to fit myself into how I would feel if I was a Bucs fan, and I would feel a pretty negative way about it if that ended up happening, which it did now. So, I mean, the Bucs now are going to have to look for a new offensive coordinator, and I mean, they've done a pretty good job of it, to be honest, with Dave Canales and his job that he did with Baker, and then him going on to be a head coach. Liam Cohen also comes in for a year, and then he's out of there with another great opportunity. So for the Buccaneers and their side of things, I mean, I would say I don't think they're going to have a lot of trouble finding candidates. They just got to make sure they pick the right one, because I do like what the Bucs also have going for them with Baker and a lot of those young guys, like I mentioned. Their offensive line is also looking better, and defensively there are some holes to plug up, but overall, this is a team that I think is still growing and getting better with their quarterback, which is exciting. But again, now you got to make sure you pick the right next head coach, right? You don't want to jeopardize that in any which way. So it was a crazy, last couple of days, because I've never seen anything like that, honestly. Usually when they make a decision, it's solidified. There's no back and forth or anything like that. But apart from just being entertaining from a third party coming from myself, just very strange situation that ends up, with another new head coach down there in Jacksonville. So hopefully, they get things in order down there and we can see Trevor Lawrence reach his full potential now, finally, hopefully, with Liam Cohen. But that is enough head coach talk, at least for now. We're going to take a break in it, and when we return, we're going to start previewing the conference championship games. We have the NFC championship game coming up right after this segment. We're going to give our matchups, our keys to the game, any last-minute news, and also our predictions to who's going to win between the Eagles and the Washington Commanders.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Back here on the show now to finally get to dissecting these conference championship games a little bit here. And we're going to start off by talking on the NFC side of things, right? With the Eagles and the Commanders. We'll get to see Philadelphia and Washington square off for the third time this weekend in the entirety of this season. Washington already with 2 road playoff wins in this postseason, try to get a clean sweep and have Jaden Daniels become the first rookie quarterback to start in a Super Bowl by slaying the Philadelphia Eagles in Lincoln Financial Field. But on the other side of things, obviously the Eagles are not going to go down easy. They are hosting this game after the Lions were bounced out of the playoffs as the number 1 seed, and they've managed 16 total wins in this regular season plus the postseason for the second time in 3 seasons. So they're very familiar with this scenario, with what it takes to ultimately get to a Super Bowl, right? Because a couple years ago, they were just in the Super Bowl playing against the Kansas City Chiefs, so they do have that opportunity to be there once again. But it's gonna take a lot more than what I feel like people are giving the Commanders for, and we're gonna get more into that. But the Eagles, more on them. They've just been on an incredible run. They're 14-1 since October, but that one loss happened to be, of course, against the Commanders. And if not, they'd still be undefeated up until this point, which is remarkable, but it's not too far off when you have Saquon, when you have A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts, that offensive line, and that great young defense that they've managed to build over there in Philadelphia. So they're very much rightly so have earned their spot at this stage of the playoffs. This will be the first conference title game, now looking at the bigger picture, between 2 NFC East teams for the first time since 1986. And Philadelphia already enters this game as 6-point favorites, according to Sportsbook, but the familiarity between these 2 teams has this level of fascination with me that really intrigues me so much with this game, and also the same with the Chiefs and the Bills that we're going to talk about later. But on that topic of familiarity and both teams really knowing each other, you look at one of the things surrounding this matchup, and you look at Saquon, who just came off of a big performance against the Rams. He ran for 205 yards on them. Also, in the first matchup with the Commanders, he ran for 146 yards and closed out the game with 2 touchdowns in Philly last time when they defeated the Commanders. Then they obviously play them again in Washington, and still he ran for 109 yards and 2 touchdowns in the first quarter, but Washington was able to hold him to 22 carries for only 41 yards the rest of the day when Jalen Hurts was injured again in that first quarter. So there's, 109 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's still a very good, it's still a better than average stat line for the mere mortals that are every other running back in the NFL. But for Saquon, that looks a bit off, especially when you look at that second half and how well the Commanders' defensive line was really able to bottle up Saquon as best as they could. You also look at the other side of things with Jaden Daniels, and him and Saquon are definitely the 2 players that are going to create the most impact in this game. And, you could bring up Jalen Hurts, but I think the way the Eagles have won games, you don't necessarily need him to step up any more than he's already been playing. So, not that he doesn't create an impact, but it's obviously not as much as Saquon, who's the focal point of everything. So, Saquon and Jaden are the 2 biggest, catalysts for their team. And on that point, I mentioned Jaden Daniels before. Going back to those 2 games in Philly, two very different performances, I guess I would say, because he didn't play awful in the first game in Philly, but I feel like he was sick, or he was dealing with something in that game, or he was really starting to feel the effects of the rookie wall at that point, and it just felt kind of off, some of the inaccurate throws, and the offense just really wasn't moving, obviously, as well as it did in their second matchup. So he played all right in the first game, but he really went off in the second game when he threw for 5 touchdowns and led them to a victory against the Eagles. So you got 2 different performances there, 2 different performances from Saquon in their 2 matchups, and now we got the rubber match. We'll see which of these big-time players can make the most impact when they play on Sunday. And what's funny also, before I get into the injuries, I thought it was pretty cool when I read that the last rookie quarterback to play in a conference championship was Brock Purdy a couple years ago, and he too was facing against the Philadelphia Eagles, and he lost to them. He wasn't able to get to that Super Bowl. So now very familiar territory for the Eagles, playing another rookie quarterback in the conference championship. This time in Philly, we'll see if they're able to repeat history, or again, if Jaden Daniels is able to be the difference, be the one that stands out on Sunday and becomes the first rookie quarterback to start in a Super Bowl. And with that in mind, now we're able to move on to the injuries, and there's no real big pieces of news that is gonna cause anybody to miss the game. There's nobody that I think is going to miss the game at all, even though Bobby Wagner was dealing with an ankle and he's hardly practiced. Frankie Louvu and Olamide Zaccheaus have both been limited so far through practice, but I still expect all those guys to fully play. We're at that point of the season where there's no tomorrow. There's no Monday after, whether you win or lose, right? You either win and you keep playing, or you lose and that's it. So all these, nagging, limited participating injuries are really not going to hold any weight. So, the practice time, it's not like it's irrelevant, but it doesn't hold as much weight as it did in the regular season. So I expect Bobby to be out there, Louvu to be out there, and Zaccheaus as well. But for the Eagles, right, Jalen Hurts was the biggest injury that everybody was tracking, and he looked to be in a lot better state, I would say, in practice today and yesterday. So he's going to be out there. Quinyon Mitchell was another one that got banged up, but he is going to be good to go as well. The other ones that are a little bit unexpected were Dallas Goedert, who was dealing with an ankle, and Cam Jurgens, who also had not practiced up till yesterday. I didn't check the injury report today, but Dallas Goedert made it known to everybody that he was going to be playing. He let some media members know that he was going to be playing despite his limited participation in practice. And Cam Jurgens still hasn't given an update, but I would be very surprised if he was not also out there, considering he's the center and how important that's going to be. But yeah, I mean, in terms of injuries, guys dealing with bumps and bruises and sprains potentially, but I don't expect any of the big name players to miss this game. So with that, we're able to move on to the keys for each team in this game. And for the Eagles, the biggest key for them is, I believe, to make it all about Jaden Daniels. If it's going to be the Commanders in the Super Bowl, you got to make sure that Jaden Daniels does so much for this team that he's throwing and he's catching the pass that he just threw. You know, it's got to be that level of only Jaden Daniels beating you. Almost to the level of Patrick Mahomes in that Super Bowl against the Buccaneers, where he was doing everything, you know, diving full on and throwing it into the end zone, running for his life back there, and just trying to will his team to that Super Bowl win. I think for the Eagles, that would benefit, you know, them and their efforts a lot if they made Jaden Daniels do that same thing, because Jaden has the very unique ability, unique to like 4 or 5 guys in the NFL, quarterbacks, meaning is that he's so good that he is able to affect the game, but also he's able to make Daimi Brown look a lot better. Zach Ertz look tremendous and look like he was playing like he was in 2019 or 2018. Zach Ertz. He's making Terry McLaurin finally stand out a lot more than maybe some of these other quarterbacks have in the past. And he's affecting the running game. Brian Robinson's getting a lot more room as well to run because you got to worry about Jaden Daniels. So in their best form, Jaden plays great, but he's also making everybody else around him a lot better. So to me, for what the Eagles have to do is not try and blitz Jaden all the time, not try and fluster Jaden, because I don't think he's going to get flustered at all. Playing in Philadelphia at this stage, a lot of people would, but anytime you look at Jaden, it just looks like he has no wherewithal of where he is, who he's playing with, at what point in the year. He's just playing his regular game, and that's a awesome ability to have. So I don't think they're going to rattle him or anything like that. So to me, the best thing they can do is try to eliminate as much as they can for some of these other guys, right? Make sure Terry has another bad game. Have Daimi Brown be the one to have to beat you if it comes down to it. Make sure Zach Ertz isn't getting those rhythm throws over the cross of the middle of the field and whatnot, right? Throw in a lot of zone coverages, try and mix up looks as well and confuse him, but don't make it easy for him and just blitz him every play, because he's very good against the blitz as well, and he'll pick you apart if you do that. So I would like to see them in a lot of zone, a lot of misconception, a lot of just, like Fugazi right out there to kind of confuse Jaden Daniels as much as possible. And for the Commander side of things, right, like really test out what Jalen Hurts' mobility and what his health is as well. Because, the obvious thing is just to say to contain Saquon, which that's a given, but also you gotta also try and get to Jalen Hurts a little bit, right? Bring a good amount of pressure and change the picture for him as much as possible. And what I mean by that is we don't know how healthy that knee is, so if you're going out there and making him move and moving him around the pocket and moving him outside of the pocket, you're going to see how healthy he is, whether or not he's hesitant to do that or whether or not he just takes off and runs, right? And, we heard their defensive coordinator say that if he does do that, they're going to test out that knee and hit him like a running back, which is great. I think there's no problem with that, but you got to make sure you know how healthy Jalen Hurts is initially, but also when you're bringing that pressure, I think that's the best thing you can do, and trying to change the picture as much as possible for Jalen, because Jalen could sit back there and going to his first read or second read, he can go and hit A.J. Brown, right? Because, that's how good A.J. is, and Jalen's not some scrub. He can hit him if he's open, right? There's no problem with that, but I think it gets a little bit worrying, and he holds on to the ball a little bit too much when you bring some pressure maybe that he wasn't expecting, or you have an initial look and then you change it as soon as he snaps the ball. I saw a great play in their game in Washington from Frankie Louvu where he was, lined up as a, off-ball linebacker, and as soon as the ball is snapped, he runs over like he's going to cover the flat over here on the left-hand side, and he quickly stops and jumps right back into the middle, right in between A.J. Brown and that pass, and intercepts it, right? And that sort of thing is what I'd like to see, right? Get Jalen to look quickly and think that Frankie Lou is going to go and cover the flat route, and instead he jumps back, confuses Jalen, and he throws an interception. That's the kind of stuff that I think Washington is going to have to throw at Jalen to confuse him and just keep him on his toes, keep him a bit frantic, as I would say, and just give them a fighting chance, because you're not just going to line up and stop them, right? They're very good. They're very talented. So trying to confuse Jalen as much as possible is going to be huge for them. And then the matchups here, pretty easy. I think Marshawn Lattimore, he was brought here for these big games. So him going up against A.J. Brown is going to be a huge matchup, right? Trying to frustrate A.J., trying to get in his head, making Jalen look the other way and things like that. I think that's going to be huge for either side, depending on who wins that matchup. Also, the Commanders' offensive line took a major hit when their offensive lineman, Sam Cosmi, tore his ACL, so he's not going to be playing. So going up against that Eagles defensive line is going to be huge. Now you're going to have a backup in there, and you'd think the Eagles would take advantage of that, and that's going to be a huge, point of attack for them in this game. And the last matchup I would mention is Terry McLaurin against these Eagles defensive backs, because the first time when they played in Philly, it was the worst game, I think, of the season for Terry McLaurin. He really didn't do anything, and he admitted it afterwards that, they played a great game and they covered him very well. But he's been a lot more involved in the playoffs. He had that big touchdown against the Lions, and even against the Buccaneers, he, played a big role in that. So that needs to continue. You have to be able to depend on him, and him kind of getting his revenge on a Quinyon Mitchell or a Darius Slay and winning those matchups is going to be huge for them as well. Or, for the Eagles too, if they're able to shut him down again. But now for the prediction, the prediction I'm going to go with, and it's tough because, the Eagles are so good, so talented. Saquon, no one's been able to stop him, so what makes me think that the Commanders are going to be able to do it, right? But with that being said, I'm going to go with the Commanders. I think Jaden's going to win. Jaden's going to will them to a victory in Philadelphia, and I don't know what Jalen's going to look like health-wise. Is he actually really healthy, or is he going to be able to stand back there and not be able to move, hold on to the ball too long, and make some mistakes that we haven't really seen from him because he's able to just run. So when you take that away, it makes me a little bit nervous, and I don't know if I can trust Jalen to just sit in the pocket all day and pick defenses apart. I don't think that's not their style at all. So if he has to do that, that makes me a little bit nervous. And honestly, without the snow, the Rams probably end up winning that game, and how close that was doesn't fill me with a ton of confidence that, the Commanders can at least keep it close. And in, regular weather, if the Commanders have the ball like Matthew Stafford did, I already trust Jaden Daniels a lot. So I think this will be the upset of arguably the entire season, right? If the Commanders beat the Eagles in Lincoln Financial Field. So I'm going to go with the Commanders. I think they're going to shock the world, and Jaden's going to create more history. That's just me. I'm hoping for some surprises here over the weekend, but that is only one of the games. We still got to talk about the other side in the main event between Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills against Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. So we're going to do this same segment again, just on the other side of things in the AFC.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC. to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
We are back here on the Chip Shot Football Podcast, and quickly before I get into the preview for the Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills, I just got the recent news that, according to ESPN, former Steelers wide receiver Antwaan Randle El, who spent really the majority of his coaching career with the Detroit Lions there and doing a very good job, as their wide receivers coach, he is now being hired by the Chicago Bears to become their assistant head coach and wide receivers coach. Another Lions assistant coach moving on to other opportunities, and now Antwaan Randle El will stay in the division, but much like Ben Johnson, who now he's going to be working with again, they're going over to Chicago. So maybe not the biggest news for everybody, but I think that's like super... One, it's super cool because Antwaan Randle El, I thought, has been doing a great job there. But another Lion leaves to join the Chicago Bears, which is kind of crazy, and it'll be even more interesting when they play each other again. So that's the mini breaking news that we had. But back to this, the main event. Everything that we'd hoped to see in an AFC Championship game, I think, is going down at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time this Sunday, right? This matchup between the Bills and the Chiefs is basically going to be a different sort of style of a Rocky versus Drago, the U.S. hockey team against the Soviet Union in the 1980s Winter Olympics, Cody Rhodes defeating Roman Reigns at WrestleMania, Peyton Manning trying to defeat Tom Brady. This matchup between the Chiefs and the Bills has sort of built up the same sort of feeling, underdog feeling, that all these other scenarios that I just threw out have filled a bunch of people with. And if you've seen any of them, you see, the underdog story, the underdog, getting their victory finally and, reaching the mountaintop for at least this stage of the story and finally defeating, the king, dethroning the king eventually. And that's the sort of feeling I think the whole city of Buffalo and the Bills would get if they finally manage to defeat Patrick in Kansas City. Because the Bills and the Chiefs have met 7 times over the last 4 to 5 years. And while Buffalo has won a couple of regular season games, they've never beaten the Chiefs in the playoffs up until this point. They're 0-3 in the playoffs against the Chiefs. And what I thought was really mind-blowing, just to add more, pressure to this game, this stat was no quarterback has ever defeated another quarterback more than 3 times in the postseason. It's never happened in postseason history that one quarterback has beaten another one more than 3 times. And we're already at that limit with Josh and Patrick. Josh has already lost to Patrick 3 times. So on Sunday, we're going to either see some history be made by Patrick defeating him 4 times more than anybody else in postseason matchups, or Josh, like all the other guys in the past, is going to be able to finally get a win over, the other guy that's been very much the heavy favorite in this duel when they face off against each other. So I thought that stat was really interesting, and some more context and more of an idea of what this matchup, I think, means in terms of who wins and, obviously who ends up moving on to the Super Bowl. You look at, first, the star power all over the field on both sides of the ball. We're not going to be shy of any big names, any big name protagonists or anything like that. It feels like I'm talking about a movie or something like that, right, with this matchup. But we got all the stars you need for this game. 2 of the best quarterbacks in the NFL and potentially of this generation. One of them maybe being one of the best of all time. Just adds a lot more to it. Kansas City chasing history, trying to three-peat, and They're going to obviously need to win this game to make that a reality potentially. And on the other side, you got the Bills and Josh Allen trying to get back to a Super Bowl, right? The Bills are 0-4, losing 4 straight Super Bowls in their history. And, they want to get back there. They want to have another opportunity of avenging all of those losses. The last time they were in a Super Bowl was in 1993 when they lost to the Cowboys. And this would also be Josh Allen's first Super Bowl, right? And I mentioned it yesterday. This could be his first and hopefully not his only Super Bowl, right? Because when you're playing against Lamar, Burrow, Herbert, Mahomes, CJ Stroud, all these guys in the playoffs, right? It's no guarantee that you just make it back every other year or every once in 3 years, right? For some people, unfortunately, this could be one of their only times or really the only time they make it. So you can't squander an opportunity like this, right? You're here in this matchup. You got to get over this hurdle that you've constantly fallen short of each and every time. So that's another thing to add to the stipulation, I guess, of this game. And in these matchups, we've seen really a lot that could happen in an NFL game, right? We've seen controversial calls against the Chiefs, right? Go figure. There was a game where Patrick, if you guys remember, and Andy Reid were very vocal about the refereeing decisions. Kind of ironic now based on what's being said about the Chiefs and how it looks like they're favored by the refs, but I don't really think that's the case. But it is ironic that one of these games has ended like this and against the Kansas City Chiefs. So we've seen controversial calls in these matchups. We've seen overtime games. We've seen game-winning or missed game-winning field goals. Coin tosses that have changed the landscape of overtime rules, right? There's been a lot of impactful things that have happened with these matchups, right? Josh, still trying to be in that group, right, with Patrick, right, not just being known as the guy that always loses to him in the postseason, and Patrick, using these matchups to build his legacy, and not only off of these matchups, but go on and win Super Bowls and things like that. A lot is made, and a lot of legacies are, set out there based on matchups like this, these legendary rivalries. And to be honest, it's not really a rivalry yet because the Bills really haven't won when it's mattered most. And on that, connecting to that point, the Chiefs and Patrick are 4-2 in conference games overall. The Bills are actually 0-4 on the road under Sean McDermott in the playoffs as well. And the Bills have also lost 7 straight AFC title games. Their last win was in 1992 when they made it to that Super Bowl, but ultimately lost as well. So you can see where the Bills' past history with getting to this point really isn't in their favor. But, it feels like this year is a little bit different. And with that comes the Bills this year that have a league best 24 turnover differential in their favor, right? They're plus 24 in turnover differential, plus 3 in the playoffs so far, while Kansas City was only a plus 6 in turnover differential in the regular season, but since they last played the Bills, they've been plus 11 in turnovers as well. So we've talked about it earlier this week, how the turnovers were, it seemed like the key factor in all of these matchups, right? Who turns it over less usually ends up winning. So I don't think this game's going to be any different. And you can see that the Bills have had that point in their favor the majority of the season and in the playoffs as well. So that's going to be a huge turning point as well. But that being said, now we can turn to the injuries. And there's no real big ones for the Chiefs other than Charles Omenihu and Jalen Watson, who weren't able to play in the first game because they were obviously injured. Now they've come back, and now they will get a chance to try and make an impact against the Bills, again, when it matters most. And for the Bills, they will unfortunately be without Taylor Rapp, their safety. He's already been ruled out with a hip injury that he suffered against the Baltimore Ravens, and he got an interception in that game, but he will not be able to recover quick enough to be able to play in this game. So that's really all the injury news because both these teams are pretty healthy. in relation to like the Commanders and the Eagles, right? So that brings us now to the keys of the game, right? The keys, what each team needs to focus on. And for the Bills, I think to me is getting that ball out quickly, and really using all the weapons that you have to your advantage, right? There's no reason why Josh has to be Superman and has to hold the ball too long and just create these unnecessary superhuman plays, right? He's really gone away from that this year. So I think now when it matters most, don't try and do anything, extraordinary, right? That's what everybody kind of builds it up to be, and that's kind of like what I did at the beginning of this segment. But really, the moment always seems bigger than it truly is, and I don't think the Bills should really go away from that and what they've been all year with being methodical, using Khalil Shakir, using guys like Curtis Samuel, Amari Cooper's obviously there, Dalton Kincaid, Ty Johnson. They got so many names that I didn't even mention James Cook either, that they could use to their advantage. So there's no reason why they should be holding on to the ball too long and taking, unnecessary actions in this game. Just continue to be who you are, run the ball, get the ball out quickly, and don't let their pass rush, affect this game, because Karlaftis is coming off of a huge game, and their entire defensive line just tormented the Texans in their last game. So if they're able to do that, I think they're going to have their best shot at defeating the Chiefs in this game. And then for the Chiefs, ironically, is off of that last point, you got to get to Josh. Yeah, you got to try and get to him as much as you can, because he has hardly been sacked this year. They didn't get to him in the regular season game, and they ended up losing that game. Not just because of that, but that's a huge, turning point in some of these games, right? You could get a strip sack, you could knock them out of field goal range, or you could just disrupt their offensive rhythm. And last time in Buffalo, the Bills were really in rhythm. They really had a good flow to them in that game, and they controlled the tempo and really managed the game perfectly. And the Chiefs got to disrupt that. They got to disrupt that and use the home crowd to their advantage, create some sort of miscommunications, and get after Josh and try and get him on the ground as much as possible. So with that, now we're going to get over to the matchups, and I'll start off with the offensive line against defensive line for both sides. The Bills won that matchup last time, and I just finished talking about it, how the Chiefs got to get on the board somehow, because last time the Bills sacked Patrick 2 times, and like I mentioned before, Josh didn't get touched or anywhere near touched last time at all, right? They never got to him, not even close. So they got to try and do that as much as possible this time, and who's able to do that and kind of disrupt the other's offense is going to have already a big advantage in this matchup. And then the Chiefs, not so secret weapon in Travis Kelce, right? Because you know what kind of player he is, how much of a legend he is. But even though in the regular season it might not look like the usual Travis Kelce, in the playoffs, it's a completely different story. He affects the game, and he looks like he's like 8 years younger whenever he plays in the playoffs, right? It's insane. So him being matched up against Matt Milano, Christian Benford, or Taron Johnson, it's going to be a group effort to try and limit Travis Kelce's impact as much as possible. So I'm going to be very interested to see those matchups, because Mark Andrews, despite, dropping the ball and fumbling, he, hurt the Bills defense a good amount, right? He was getting heavily involved in that game. So Travis Kelce, you'd expect him to do the same thing, and we'll see if the Bills can have more success against Travis than they did against Mark Andrews. But the last matchup I have on here is the obvious one. Patrick against Josh, even though it's not a direct matchup. This game's going to come down to the quarterback play and who makes... It sounds kind of counterintuitive, but who makes the safer choices and essentially who doesn't lose this game. And that sounds weird because you don't have Patrick or you don't have Josh to not lose football games. You obviously have them to win football games, but people get too enamored with Patrick doing some crazy thing and winning the game. And same thing with Josh, right? Doing some crazy physical ability or just some crazy throw and, winning the game that way. But I think both of them have matured to a point where they just don't need to do that. And they found that the entire team is in their best form when everything's running like a well-oiled machine and they're just managing the game, not necessarily just taking over at any given time. And that maturity, that lack of turnover, and really managing and controlling the game is what makes this matchup so much more interesting, because we've seen them both take over games, but now we're in this period where they're just trying to keep everything in control and just overlook everything and making sure everything is supposed to go as it should, which is a very big change of pace, if I'm being honest. So that is the matchup. And in terms of who's going to win this game, I think it's just come to a point where we talk about the matchups, the keys to the game, the history, the stipulations around this matchup. But the biggest thing and simplest thing is that there just has to come a time where the Bills just got to stand up to the Chiefs and just say, you know what, like, this has gone on long enough. This losing to the same team, the same guy, the same coach, hearing the same thing over and over again just has to stop. And I think this is the Bills' year. I think not to win a Super Bowl, I'm not going to say that now, but I think this is their year to finally beat the Chiefs, right? You can't just keep having the Chiefs. You can't have Kansas City have too many things go wrong and still come back like they've done before. And I think this is an opportunity for them where if they get on top of Kansas City like they did in the first game, it's not like the Chiefs have this crazy explosiveness that they're able to change the game just like that. We talk about them being methodical and, very slow paced. So I think this is their opportunity to do something like that. And if the Bills are able to get on them and, have control of this game early on, I feel like the Chiefs are going to have a really tough time trying to come back in this game because they don't have a Tyreek Hill. They don't have a younger Travis Kelce to just make a play out of nothing. So everything is so slow-paced and everything is so thought out and controlled that if the Bills, build up a lead for whatever reason, then the Chiefs have to still be slow, have to still be methodical to try and come back into this game, or else they're going to be doing something that they're not really accustomed to, at least this season. So I think that's going to play in the Bills' favor, and, I think it's just their time, right? Simply as that, they just gotta get over it. They gotta get over and go in there and defeat Patrick and the Chiefs, which is obviously an extremely hard thing to do. No one's done it, but I'm hopeful for some change this year, and that would lead me to my dream Super Bowl matchup in Buffalo and Washington. But before we start talking about Super Bowls or anything like that, that will conclude our show today. I want to thank you guys for joining me on today's episode of the Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. And if you want to see more of this specific show, please make sure to check out both YouTube channels, the Podcast Network channel and the Sports Network channel. Obviously on YouTube, where you can catch more coverage around the NFL with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host, talking some more NFL, the draft coming up, off-season moves, head coaching moves, everything related to the NFL you can find on there. So thank you guys again for joining me on today's episode, and make sure to come back next week when we revisit and review everything from the conference championship games. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you guys again next week.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit.